Hello, everyone, and welcome to a horribly nerdy podcast. The podcast that's so bad, horrible is in its name. I do have to apologize for this podcast. It's going to sound weird, probably monotone, and you're going to hear me sniffle a lot. I am really freaking sick. I've tried recording at least 2 other times. It did not work out. Like right now, this is when my voice is at its best. So I do apologize if this episode kind of sucks. So please bear with me. Today we're going to be talking about
the giant turtle Gamera, certainly one of the most controversial subjects of our time. Earlier in our program, you stated the belief that Gamera could in fact exist.
That decision was made by the Commander-in-Chief. I do know that if Gamera exists, our world is about to face a calamity of enormous proportion.
本日江東区のいわゆる海抜0メートル地帯へ高潮が逆流し
先ほど福岡港に海図が出現しました。そんな生物があり得るの？
今回の敵は全くの異生物です。敵の生存を許すならば我々に未来はなく、我々が生き残るためには殲滅戦の覚悟を持って臨む以外ないと思います。
Gamera, Guardian of the Universe is a 1995 kaiju film. Basically, we have a rehashing of the Gamera story. So we start off with a ship comes aground on a mysterious atoll that appears out of nowhere. And after some scientists do some research, they find this strange obelisk-like thing, and it talks about the Atlanteans, or even possibly the lost continent of Mu, have bioengineered an ultimate weapon, the Shadow of Gauss. But this weapon has turned on them and started eating them and destroying their lives. So they created the anti-weapon Gamera, the giant plasma fireball spitting turtle. While this is going on, a expedition has been launched to see what happened to this island because everyone on it has seemingly disappeared overnight. A young woman goes to find her colleague, and all they find are giant piles of bird pellets. So while digging through these bird pellets, they start finding personal effects of some of the people on the island, like her colleague's glasses, and they've come to find out that these people were eaten. But what were they eaten by? Well, of course, something has uncovered the Gauss eggs. They've hatched, and now I believe there are 3 to begin with, and they are able to reproduce asexually. Each one is capable of laying 6 to 9 eggs. So we have 3 eggs that survived. 3 now have hatched, are starting to eat people. And of course, this is what has caused Gamera to rise from the ocean's depths. Soon thereafter, while they're on the atoll, the expedition, the obelisk breaks, and the atoll starts moving, and we find that, of course, the atoll is Gamera. He has now awakened, and he is going to fight the Gauss. So the Japanese Self-Defense Force has put people in charge of capturing the Gauss birds. They call them birds, but they look more like bats. They're like reptilian. They don't have feathers. They're more reptilian skinned and everything. And so they they figure out that these birds don't like light. They're mainly nocturnal. But of course that changes later on in the film, where all of a sudden our final battle is in daylight, go figure. But anyways, so they have decided to trick these birds into going into this baseball stadium, which they can close the dome or the roof, so that way they can tranquilize these birds and put them in cages and transport them to where they need to be. But of course, Gamera shows up and causes all kinds of problems. What we find is the birds are able to emit a laser-like weapon, cutting weapon from their mouths while they're screaming, and they escape. So Gamera ends up being able to kill one of the birds, but the other two escape and fly away. Now, they find on another island that the Gauss birds have not only gotten a lot bigger, but now they're eating more and more people and more animals. And as they are trying to rescue a young boy, they trip and fall on a bridge, in which Gauss hears that and decides, oh, dinner time. But of course, Gamera comes and saves them using one of his plasma balls. He is then able to kill the one Gauss bird. Next thing you know, the other one shows up, fights Gamera, injures him, so he has to go to the bottom of the sea to recover. Shortly thereafter, the Gauss bird is seen in Tokyo. It kidnaps people on a train, rips open the train, and eats them. And you see this all happen. You watch Gauss eat people. Just very interesting. Haven't really seen that in a kaiju film before until then. And then, next thing we know, it is daylight. Gamera has healed his wounds, and the final battle ensues. Next, as we, it seems to be first Gamera has the upper hand, then Gauss, and the next thing we know, Gauss has took off, Gamera in hot pursuit because he is able to fly. Yes, Gamera, the giant plasma ball spitting turtle, is also able to fly, and it takes off after Gauss. Attaches itself to his foot. Gauss then cuts off his own foot, and Gamera plummets to the earth, landing on an oil refinery and blowing himself up. Gauss has won. Roll the credits. Movie done. Oh wait, there's more to the movie, sorry. So, next thing we know, the fire starts to spin and ravel and kind of turn into a tornado-like thing, and Gamera is revived and is now able to use his ultimate weapon, where his chest burst opens and a unibeam, Iron Man unibeam-like weapon totally disintegrates Gauss. And we have the end of our film. It's a decent movie. I shouldn't say it's a decent. I really like this movie a lot. When I was a kid, I was probably like 8 or 9, I watched this film for the first time. And when it got to the scene of Gauss eating people, the sound design behind it was so disgusting because you heard the wet slopping noises, the crunching of the bones and all that. It really affected me as a child. And I couldn't finish the film. I literally threw up from it. And so it took me probably another 5 or 6 years before I sat down and watched it again. And I was like, oh, what was I scared of when I was younger? It's just obviously dummies. Like, they're just fake people but apparently I hadn't really, I don't know, I guess when I was younger I didn't really put 2 and 2 together, realizing that it was a movie and that these events weren't actually happening. But what can you do? So, Gamera, Guardian of the Universe, it was decided after so many years to revive the Gamera series. And the original Gamera series, it really catered towards children, while this one they were like, nah, even though there's a lot of like childlike things involved, there's children that help give Gamera his power and blah blah blah. This really was geared towards the people that grew up with Gamera, so it's a little more adult oriented with the gore, the disgustingness, eating people, things like that. So why has this impacted me? Because this film not only did it scar me and horrify me when I was a child, it made me appreciate all the different Gamera films. It made me appreciate everything you could do. How do I put this? Like, what you could do in a kaiju film. So you didn't just have to have that same formula of, a giant monster appears, destroys the city, or a giant monster appears, destroys the city. Oh wait, there's another monster. We needed to fight this monster. Oh, it ends up being the hero. This actually gives a little bit of backstory of where they were bioengineered, the Atlanteans, and then even as the films progress, you get more and more of the lore, and you figure out what Gamera really is, and it's a very interesting concept. I quite enjoy where they went with the films. One piece of tidbit, a couple things. The Gauss creatures are portrayed by females. They actually had ladies portray the stunt animation, or not stunt animation, but the suitmation. So they put them in the suits, which was the very first time a female ever portrayed a kaiju, which is very interesting because from the 50s to the 90s, that never happened. It was all men that portrayed kaiju. It was all men that wore the suits. So to have because they wanted Gauss to have a more feminine-like quality and have feminine movements, they decided to put females in there. Very interesting. They all do a very, very good job. They really portray that for what they need for Gamera, like that mothering instinct of protecting her child and all that, with the eggs and everything. It's very interesting. They did a very, very good job with that. And the young woman who plays Asagi, who is like the professor's daughter who ends up having a psychic link with Gamera, she is played by Steven Seagal's real-life daughter. And he went with her to the premiere of the film and everything, and there are pictures online you can see of them, and he appears to be having a great time, so that's really cool. She comes back eventually later on, I believe in the third film. She comes back, and she has, a lot more to do in that film than she did in this one. This one, she just kind of, when she bonds with Gamera, she feels his pain, and whenever he needs to rest, she rests. So she just spends a lot of time getting injured and sleeping. But, for her character later on in the third film, she does an amazing, amazing job. It's hard to tell because, the English dubs, they're very flat, they're very monotone. But when you watch it in the Japanese language, it's you can tell the emotion, the raw intensity and all that is there. It's very, very cool. Gamera, Guardian of the Universe, I give it 5 giant fire-breathing turtles versus 5 giant laser-emitting birds. 5 out of 5, 1000% in my top 10 favorite kaiju films. I was so scared of Gauss when I was a child that Gauss is like one of my favorite kaijus of all time, and it's going to be going on my sleeve of tattoos when I can afford them. I'm going to do 1 full arm of tattoos of all my favorite kaiju, and you will most definitely see the Gauss on that. So that was Gamera, Guardian of the Universe, 1995.
Godzilla, King of the Monsters, alive, surging up from the depths of the sea on a tidal wave of terror to wreak vengeance on mankind.
Godzilla, King of the Monsters, it's alive!
A gigantic beast,
stalking the earth, crushing all before it.
in a cyclonic cavalcade of electrifying horror.
Raging through the streets on a rampage of total destruction.
Godzilla, King of the Monsters,
Incredible titan of terror.
wiping out a city of 6 million in a holocaust of flame.
Jet planes cannot destroy it.
Bombs cannot kill it.
All modern weapons fail.
Is this the end of our civilization?
Can the scientists of the world find a way to stop this creature?
For the answer, see Godzilla, King of the Monsters.
You may wish to deny it, but your eyes tell you it's true.
A tale to stun the mind.
More fantastic than any ever written by Jules Verne.
More terrifying than any ever shown on the screen.
Awesome.
Incredible.
Unbelievable.
A story beyond your wildest dreams.
Dynamic violence.
Savage action.
Spectacular thrills.
Godzilla, King of the Monsters.
Fantastic beyond comprehension.
Gripping beyond compare.
Astounding beyond belief.
The mightiest monster of them all.
See Godzilla,
King of the Monsters.
So, Godzilla, or Gojira, as it's known in Japan, 1954, the very first and original Godzilla movie. Yes, I am talking about the Japanese version. I am going to go into
a bit about the American version because there is some interesting tidbits that I'd like you to know, but we're going to mainly focus on the Japanese version and what Godzilla means to me. If you haven't figured out, Godzilla is probably my favorite kaiju of all time. I have been obsessed with Godzilla for as long as I can remember. One of my earliest memories is actually a Godzilla movie. I just remember laying on my mom when I was really, really young. My mom was laying on the couch. I was laying with her. We were watching TV, and I believe it was Godzilla Returns or Godzilla 1984. That's my earliest memory that I can recall is a Godzilla movie. So it's safe to say that kaiju have impacted my life quite a bit. And that's where most of my nerdiness comes in, is kaiju stuff. I collect action figures, every movie I can, comic books, anything that has to do with a kaiju, I will most likely try and get it when I have the money. There are a bunch of comic books coming out about kaiju right now that I really want to get, but unfortunately I cannot afford it, but one day I will get them. So yeah, so Godzilla 1954. And I'm not really going to go into much of the storyline because probably everyone knows the story of Godzilla. If you haven't seen it, you've at least heard about it. So basically, a giant sea monster is resurrected by nuclear weapons. He attacks Tokyo. Meanwhile, there is a scientist named Dr. Serizawa who has created the ultimate weapon called the Oxygen Destroyer, in which once it is released in water, it completely destroys oxygen in the water, and it immediately kills everything in the water. So they convinced Dr. Serizawa to use this weapon on Godzilla after Godzilla rampages through Tokyo, kills thousands, destroys trains, lights the whole place on fire. They find him resting on the bottom of the ocean. They send in divers, and Dr. Serizawa has decided to kill himself because he feels just like Godzilla is an allegory for nuclear weapons. His weapon, if got into the wrong hands, could cause major destruction and catastrophe. So he sacrifices himself by detonating the weapon while he's there with Godzilla, thus killing himself and killing Godzilla. Of course, we know that there's more Godzillas out there because there's more sequels out there. But this was the original. It was an allegory for nuclear war, especially what happened with the bombings and everything, and just the horrors of nuclear war. And it's probably one of the best films out there, if not kaiju films, one of the best films out there. It holds to this day. I know people will say, oh, it's the graphics, the special effects, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, those are real. Like, it's not a CGI. That's, someone painstakingly created these miniatures. They created this suit. They created this mask. There's even a puppet used. And that's why when you see close-ups, the face looks a lot different than when you do on the suit. Of course, that being, they came up with the design and then changed the design, things like that. Excuse me, sorry. But yeah, I mean, Godzilla is one of the best films out there. It has heart, has drama. It's saddening. It's thrilling. It's amazing. There is a scene, and this is where it differs from the American version, because originally the American version, they cast Raymond Burr, who was huge at the time, and he had seen the original Godzilla, and he loved the Japanese version. And when originally it was pitched to him, when he signed on, they said, oh, what we're going to do is we're going to dub everything and make this a comedy. And he was like, no, God, no. He's like, I will not be in this film if you do that. He said, there's a reason why this film is the way it is. And he fought so hard for them to keep it a dramatic story. And that's, what we got. And then they just filmed scenes with him and cut him in at certain points. And I mean, even the American version is really good. The only issue I have is there are certain points in the dialogue that they've dubbed. Like there's a scene in the American version where Raymond Burr character, Steve Martin, he's a press journalist who is gathered around, he's part of this, supposedly part of this huge meeting, but in reality, this is just scenes from the original, where they're discussing what could have happened, what happened to these people, to the original fishing village, and so on and so forth. But in the original Japanese version, they actually know about Godzilla already, so you literally hear them in the Japanese talking about Gojira, and of course they don't acknowledge it at all. Steve Martin and the other character with him don't acknowledge it at all, because this is supposed to be before we even discover what Godzilla really is. So it is out of context. There's also another scene where a young woman is holding her 2 children, and she is crying, and she's saying how they'll be saved soon, and they'll be okay, don't worry, children. In the original Japanese version, it's much more haunting. She's literally talking about how her husband was killed in the war, their father, and how they're going to be joining her father soon. Don't worry, though they know they're going to die. Like, she's not even trying to sugarcoat it. She's saying, we're gonna join your father in heaven. Don't worry, things like that. And that's one of the most haunting scenes I've ever witnessed in a film. It's just, especially when I was, it took me a long time to watch the original Japanese version, because I'm not a big fan of subtitled films, but I've come around quite a bit. But honestly, this is a masterpiece by Ishiro Honda. A fantastic film. Eiji Tsuburaya did the effects for this painstakingly. Him and his crew, just amazing effects that they did. Just, this movie holds such a huge place in my heart. I really love this film. It's a great, fantastic story. Let's get into more of like the behind the scenes and stuff like that, because there's a lot of cool behind the scenes facts about this film. So, in order to create his iconic roar, the sound department tried numerous animal roars for Godzilla, but they couldn't find anything that's suitable for a creature of such immense size. I always butchered his name. Akira Ifukube. The composer, Akira Ifukube, came up with Godzilla's roars by rubbing a coarse, resin-coated leather glove up and down the strings of a double bass or a contrabass, and reverberated that recorded sound, which is now that iconic sound we hear, that roar we hear, that has been it's been duplicated thousands of times, has never really changed. They've just updated it throughout the years, and just when you hear that sound, Godzilla. They also his thunderous footsteps were used by beating a kettle drum with a knotted rope, and boy, is it excuse me, it is effective. During Godzilla's rampage through downtown Tokyo, one of the buildings he destroys is the old Nichigeki Theater, after his tail smashes into it. And supposedly, when this was premiered at the theater, several viewers ran out of the theater thinking that they were actually going to be crushed. One of the most infamous legends regarding the production of the film had Ishiro Honda and Eiji Tsuburaya on the observation deck of one of the Tokyo buildings. They were planning Godzilla's path of destruction when a visitor on the deck overheard their conversation and became concerned. The pair was stopped by authorities and questioned. That's never been confirmed. Again, it's one of the most infamous legends about the film. George Lucas cites the miniatures in this film as his inspiration for all of his effects in Star Wars. So the impact that this film has had on other major films is just amazing. It's just honestly, I cannot gloat about this film enough. Actually, Godzilla has a star on the Walk of Fame in 2004 for his 50th anniversary. He was given the Hollywood Walk of Fame star. I've actually found that star. I've taken my picture with it. Unfortunately, I don't have the pictures anymore because I lost that camera. So if I ever get out to California again, I'm hoping I can find it and take another picture. It would have been the third most expensive Japanese movie at the time of its release, behind Seven Samurai and Samurai 1, all of which were produced by Toho. the starting budget of Godzilla was greater than that of most samurai films, but those would always tend to go extremely over budget. Through the golden age of the 50s and early 60s, Toho's science fiction and monster films would become the studio's most expensive productions, Toho being able to afford such costly productions due to their ability to sell their films overseas to foreign markets, and became hugely popular in Europe and America and other countries. Their science fiction films. You could get the rights for cheap. You could edit them how you wanted, and you could distribute it how you wanted. And that's kind of why Godzilla is as impactful and well known nowadays, is because they were able to acquire the rights so many times to distribute the film America and stuff like that. A common misconception is that the name Godzilla was Americanized by its U.S. distributors. It was actually the idea of Toho and its international sales division who would translate Gojira into Godzilla. Toho used the title Godzilla in their 1955 English language sales catalog a full year before finding an American distributor, and when it played briefly in Japanese American-owned theaters in Los Angeles and New York, producer Joseph E. Levine would purchase the rights and create Transworld to distribute and release the film Godzilla, King of the Monsters. So, Toho always wanted, when it came to the English-speaking thing, to call it Godzilla. That was never created by Americans and all that. And it's always been a rumor that, oh, we got it wrong. They just said Godzilla because they didn't understand, blah, 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 blah. They said no. They always wanted to keep the God part in Godzilla. There were stop-motion animation. There was supposed to be stop-motion animation, but it was rejected because of the time it would take. Special effects director Eiji Tsuburaya sincerely wanted to use this method, but he faced the grim reality that there was not enough people in Japan with experience in this technique, and that Toho would never give him the time to properly model and do the film. So that's when they decided to do practical effects. It does have a couple, is when there's a vehicle crash, and when his tail moves, there's some pretty obvious things. They're not as clean as a suit and all that, but again, just one of them. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. I completely lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. The opening scene in which there is a Japanese fishing boat which ended up contaminated by radioactivity. It was inspired by the Lucky Dragon incident, where the crew of a Japanese fishing boat were contaminated by radioactive fallout from the Castle Bravo test, the detonation of the first hydrogen bomb. This generated much controversy in Japan, especially after the death of the ship's radio man. This event served as a major influence on the film, with the original script making the connection even more explicit by an opening scene in which a contaminated boat ominously arrives on shore with the entire crew missing. They did decide to change that a bit. The film received a nomination for Best Picture from Japanese film associations, but unfortunately lost to Seven Samurai. However, Eiji Tsuburaya would win his first technical award for his visual effects work. And I can't get over the practical effects in this. Fantastic, amazing. There's a reason why this movie still holds up to today. I'm sorry, my brain is just fucking fried. I am so sick. I wanted to get this episode out. I didn't want to miss a week, so that's why I'm kind of fighting through this. But yeah, this film holds up to this day because of the work behind it, because the amazing score that Akira put in, Eiji Tsuburaya, his effects work, Ishiro Honda's directing, the actors, just phenomenal work from them. That's another reason why this stands up to time. You've got Takashi Shimura as Dr. Yamane. I'm going to butcher these names, I apologize. Akihiko Hirata as Dr. Serizawa. Akira Takarada, who is probably one of the most well-known Godzilla actors, has come back many, many times as Ogata. And young Imiko is played by Momoko Kochi. And she is absolutely fantastic in this film. Again, everyone that was acting in this film, just absolutely fantastic. That's why I highly recommend the original Japanese language film. It really conveys the seriousness of the film. Their acting is just top notch. Where that's what kind of tends to struggle in translation when they dub these films, because they end up being very monotone. You can tell the voice actors just came in and just, oh, I have to record this for the day, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Oh, look, it's Godzilla, or, oh, it's Godzilla. In the later films, that really becomes a problem. But at least in this first film, they tend to take it a little more seriously, but unfortunately, it just doesn't have that dramatic effect as the original Japanese film does. I'm going to stop rambling about Godzilla because I'm going to go pass out. Thank you all for checking out. And if you haven't seen Godzilla, please check it out. If you have seen it, let me know what you think. Again, one of my favorite kaiju films, if not one of my favorite films of all time. Please, we're going to be covering more Godzilla in the future. Especially one that really has... how do I put this? Anyways, you know what? We'll talk about that next week. I gotta go. All right, thanks. Future Chris here. I just realized that I didn't give a rating for Godzilla. I mean, obviously it's going to be a 5 out of 5, of course. It's the original Godzilla. How can it not be a 5 out of 5? Anyways, so I just wanted to chime in here, give a rating. I'm sorry this one's so short. I am still super sick, and I'm working on the next episode already. So I just wanted to throw this out here so that way, at the very least, it's ready to go and you all have something for this week. I do apologize for the shortness of it and for the... I haven't even had a chance to listen back and how it sounds, but I hope it sounds at least okay. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.